NFL Week 11 on the horizon, here to help break it down from a betting perspective and also share some sports gambling insights that'll be of value well beyond this week. NFL and NBA prop bettor Rich. Rich works with renowned prop bettor Porter, who has been on the show multiple times and who introduced me to Rich at BetBash on the platform formerly known as Twitter. You can follow Rich at prop_Rich. Rich, thanks for taking time to connect. Great to see you again after meeting at Bet Bash. Welcome to Props and Hops.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, Bet Bash was a great event. It was great to meet you and a lot of other people, and just been in full swing with NFL and NBA.
I can imagine it is quite the time of year for you right now. So we'll cut to the chase here, and I think we'll get to a deep dive on your day-to-day role, perhaps a bit more detailed look after discussing this week's NFL slate. But to set the table for this conversation, would appreciate it if off the top you could tell us about your background in betting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of guys close to my age and my generation came from like the poker community back in the 2000s. You know, I was back on full tilt grinding tournaments and going to cash games, playing 1-2 for a long time. And you know, I didn't grow up in a sports family. I didn't grow up in with a dad who liked gambling. I just sort of was always sort of interested in action and risk. And I was really into sports. You know, I've been obsessed with NBA for 20 plus years. And I met Porter as friends, you know, not even connected to sports betting. And then, you know, around 2015, he introduced me to the idea of player props when it was like first getting going. And we, you know, collaborated, and I was betting on Bovada, and, you know, every line was 2 points off, and it was pretty hard to lose. And, you know, I kind of got introduced in that, and then kind of took a break from it. And then around 2021, Porter recruited me into, you know, doing one season kind of full time, and it went, you know, better than expected. And I've been full time ever since.
I think that lays a great foundation for the course of this conversation. Again, we'll get plenty more into what the day-to-day looks like these days. But first, do want to lead off, since we're in the throes of football season, with a look at NFL Week 11 from a betting perspective. And Rich, I usually start with props. I know I'm recording the show a day earlier than usual this week. Not too many props are too widely available yet. Any thoughts on what is available by any chance, perhaps in the Thursday night game between the Eagles and Commanders?
Yeah, I wanted to, you know, bring something of interest, a prop that people could take a look at. There is not a lot posted yet because it is Tuesday, so there's only the Thursday night game, and they generally on Tuesdays only have the stars and the quarterbacks. What I did have a lean though, which is I think that Terry McLaurin as like a true wide receiver one is still pretty undervalued with this Jaden McDaniels revelation. And his line on FanDuel at least was sitting around 59.5 minus 114. I think there's a bit of value there. I have him projected for around 72. He's probably playable up to 62.5, 63.5. Wouldn't go any further than that. But I think there's still value with him not with that connection not being fully realized.
Got it. I think that Washington's offense has been the surprise gift that keeps on giving throughout the course of the season. So if that continues to hold up on Thursday night, then no complaints from anybody who follows suit backing Terry McLaurin. I will swap my usual look at a prop this week with a derivative that I've been eyeing now for some time. I'm glad you had something for Thursday night, being the expert in this space. I will go ahead and look to a derivative. Cincinnati team total over 23.5 against our beloved Chargers. Nice to have a fellow Chargers fan on this show. I've got the visor on tonight because I'm happy with the way they've been performing. Not sure how much longer I'll be able to be happy with their results, given the gauntlet that their upcoming schedule appears to be. And if there's an edge betting on them, I'm happy to do so, as I've done in recent weeks on this show. In this case, also happy to bet against them if there appears to be an edge going the other way.
Sure.
And I'll note with this number, Cincinnati team total over 23.5, minus 105 at DraftKings, minus 108 at FanDuel. Admittedly, this number has lost a bit of its luster since market-making books opened this game with a spread of Chargers favored by 2.5, a total as low as 44.5, which, just doing a bit of basic math here, would have implied a Cincinnati team total as low as 21. Of course, that number was too good to be true. It was probably never going to last. And especially with this game now lined at Chargers -1.5, total 47. We're looking at that current line of 23.5 for Cincinnati. I do still think it's bettable, albeit for a slightly reduced wager amount since the price point reflects a slightly reduced edge. But here's why I think there's still enough of an edge to get in play. And I've got a pretty long windup here, Rich, so bear with me.
Okay, yeah,
I'll try to be
yeah.
quick and
Hit
make
me
sure
with
it's
it.
not just a laundry list, but some well thought out, valuable points at the same time. First off, I think the core thesis is that two things can be true at the same time. One, the Chargers defense vastly exceeding expectations to the credit of defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, the rest of the new regime, and of course the players getting it done on the field. And two, the Chargers defense can be overrated due in part to the strength of schedule it's faced thus far.
Right.
Now, obviously, you can't control strength of schedule, and how you play trumps who you play, but that doesn't mean strength of schedule doesn't matter, especially at the extremes. And for a bit more context here, the Chargers defense leads the NFL in points allowed per game, and it's not even close. Chargers average points allowed 13.1. The number 2 team in the league, Pittsburgh, 16.2. So we're talking a delta of more than a field goal. And that same gap between the number 1 Chargers and number 2 Steelers is equal to the gap between those number 2 Steelers and number 9 Buffalo. But to account for how the Chargers have gotten here, excuse me, you must account, I think, at least to some extent, for who they've played. So getting into it here, the Raiders with Gardner Minshew at quarterback benched shortly after that game. The Panthers, Bryce Young, benched shortly after that game.
Yep.
The Steelers, Justin Fields, has since been benched. The Broncos, Bo Nix, that was week 6 off the Chargers bye, so a favorable early season setting against a rookie quarterback. The Saints against Spencer Rattler, who was benched in game, followed by Jake Haener, who's no longer starting. Cleveland, Jameis Winston at quarterback in his second game off the bench. And most recently, Tennessee starting Will Levis, a bit of an embattled second-year quarterback in his first game back from an injury to his throwing shoulder. I'd also seen his absence referred to as a soft benching. So not exactly murderer's row there. Now, to their credit, they held both Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense and Kyler Murray and the Cardinals offense to just 17 points. But beyond these two tests, it's been a magic carpet ride of opponents, as evidenced by being able to say that it's now week 11 and they've played 2 quarterbacks who posed a legitimate threat. Now, speaking of legitimate threats here, enter Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and the Cincinnati offense. I think it's a threat unlike anything the Chargers have faced so far, especially after Rashee Rice went down early in that matchup with the Chiefs. And if T. Higgins can come back and diversify that Cincinnati offensive attack even further, that would be icing on the cake. I'm not banking on it. We didn't get a promising update earlier today from Bengals head coach Zach Taylor with regard to Higgins' status. But on the other side of the ball, I think a factor worth watching from an injury perspective as well, Khalil Mack might be limited again if he can go. He played just 4 snaps last week and none after the first quarter. Now, one more subtle factor here, Rich, then I want to get your thoughts on this. To the Chargers' credit, in all 6 of their wins so far, they've been nursing double-digit leads late in the game by running the ball to help run out the clock. And the effect that has is fewer plays, not only for the offense, but for the defense as well. And if the point spread in this one is any indication, again, Chargers -1.5, they're probably not going to be nursing a double-digit lead late in the game and sitting on the clock for much of this matchup against Cincinnati. That should mean more plays for both teams on both sides of the ball, and thus more opportunity for Cincinnati to clear 23.5 points. So in a nutshell here, Chargers defense has been good. Don't want to overlook that, but also overrated based on some top-line metrics. The Bengals offense with extra time to prepare off Thursday Night Football last week, presenting a major step up in class in a game that may well see more plays than we've seen in a typical setting for the Chargers so far this season, thus more bites at the apple for Cincinnati. I guess one aspect, that's the handicap. That's more than enough of a handicap. One thing also from a pricing standpoint here, I'm seeing over 22.5 -125 at BetOnline. So we're talking about the difference between 23 possibly winning or losing this wager. Team totals are not in my wheelhouse. The handicap has explained why I like this bet either way, but I do understand 23 to be somewhat of a key number. So it may be worth shopping around to see if you can make 23 a win number by playing over 22.5 without laying too much big. All that said, if you can't beat 23.5 at minus 105 to the over for Cincinnati, I can't fault playing that, with 24 also being a key number in team totals and representing a win for this wager. Rich, I know that's a lot. Feel free to just cherry pick anything that stood out there. Any thoughts from your perspective on a look at the Cincinnati team total over this week against our Chargers?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the Chargers, I don't think, have given up over 21 points this entire year, but I think there is a kind of sell high kind of opportunity here. Like you stated, some of those quarterbacks that they've faced, the Chargers always are playing from ahead, and they're playing against some of the worst quarterbacks and offenses in the league. And like you mentioned with the Broncos, they're up and coming now. Bo Nix is much better. I don't know if he had the same results if they were to play this week. And they've caught some teams at the right time. Like they caught the Bryce Young like game when he was in ruins. He's playing a little bit better now. That team's playing a little bit better. So I think this upcoming schedule, and frankly, the Bengals are now, their offense is buzzing. The first few weeks they were having some struggles like they do every year. Like I don't know what it is about that team that the first 4 games they seem to struggle offensively, and then they just catch stride and they just start putting up a lot of points. So at first I was hearing you talk about it, I was like 23.5, but I do think there is some opportunity for a regression to the mean with that team total. But yeah, I think this the team has definitely benefited from time of possession, running the ball and being ahead early in games. And the counter is that the Chargers offense is now improving, have some of the wide receivers coming back. But as you said, if Khalil Mack is limited or out, not being able to get to the quarterback, I think my lean is towards this being more of a shootout as opposed to what you've seen from the Chargers the first 10 weeks of the season. So yeah, 20. If you can get the 22.5 with paying a little bit more juice, I definitely would try to shop that. 23, is getting to a kind of key number area. So definitely would try to shop, the 22.5. Yeah, and like you said, like the team total, deducing if you like the Bengals team total over, you're looking at what you expect to be a pretty close game, or pretty close to that overall total.
Yeah, and Chargers totals have been on the rise in recent weeks. I think as the market has caught on to a more pass-centric offense, as Herbert has returned to health. So whether it's the Bengals perhaps winning this one, or the Chargers with a lead but in a back and forth affair you wouldn't have to squint so hard to see, I think there could be a decent edge there. And that said, Rich, there could be edges well beyond games involving our favorite team. So I'd love to turn it over to you as well to see if we look at other markets, whether that's full game sides, totals, teasers, maybe any futures, anywhere you might want to take this. Is there anywhere that you feel like you're seeing the most value on the betting board as it currently stands?
So I took a look at the slate this week, and I didn't see like a ton of value. I try to keep things simple. I either, this time we're in week 11, and at this point in this, week 10, week 11, week 12, teams are trending in different directions. Teams are making their playoff pushes. Teams are making their pushes for to tank, and it maybe isn't fully realized in week 14, week 15. We're like, oh, that team was like calling it in, And so a couple of those teams I saw was the Cowboys, just based on injuries and just management and just overall dysfunction, and the Titans. They're moving in the wrong direction. Calvin Ridley is not a thing. They traded DeAndre Hopkins. They are probably leaning towards getting a high pick in the draft. So I liked the Cowboys teased with the Vikings 6-point teaser, teasing it down to
would we be looking at
Houston
minus 1.5
I think the Cowboys
Dallas?
Houston. My apologies.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
Houston teasing Houston and teasing teasing the Vikings 2-game teaser 6 point. Just keep it simple. Teams moving in the wrong direction. Teams that are trying to make a playoff push, and that'd be my pick for the week. I also don't mind playing those spreads straight up. I think both of those have pretty big blowout potential. Just based on the trending of those two teams and where they're going over the next six weeks.
I think you make a good point about that Houston-Dallas game, and I'll touch on that in a bit. I mean, the classic Wong teaser model crossing through the key numbers of 3 and 7 has been on fire lately. That said, it was ice cold to start the season, and it's not the only way to approach teasers. So I can also appreciate you brought up a team like the Vikings that isn't favored by more than a touchdown right now, but still stands out to you as having some teaser appeal. Now, one question as far as that Minnesota-Tennessee matchup is concerned, typically, I know you've probably got a million outs in, and within Porter's operation, getting teasers at favorable prices, probably not that big of a challenge. For most bettors, even finding minus 120, it might be about as good as they can do these days. And if you're laying minus 120 in a 2-team 6-point teaser, you're effectively laying about minus 285 on each leg. And the Vikings here, teasing them down from minus 6 to pick them, basically taking them to win outright. And that's, again, minus 285 on Minnesota to win outright. I'm looking at the money line right now, and I'm seeing Vikings prices of minus 250 at Circa, minus 260 at Bookmaker. So with that leg in particular, would you be inclined to give any thought just to taking Minnesota on the money line if you thought a 6-point teaser had value as well?
With how I, model, I typically just don't take anything over minus 200. On its own, if I'm parlaying it with another money line, I'm putting it as kind of like a juice reductor, I might be favorable to it. That being said, like those, if you do favor that side, that price is not terrible, but frankly, I'd rather just play the points at that point, because I think that this is a touchdown or larger spread. I mean, 5.5. I think it should be around 6.5. 6.5, 7 probably is about right. The way I have it modeled. But yeah, using getting the money line at minus 250 isn't a bad price.
All right, and if Sam Darnold can throw the ball to his own team this week, then that might also help to smooth out some of the potential variance.
We're buying low. We're buying low.
Yeah, I think 12-7 against the Jags, if I recall last week. It could have easily been 22 or 32-7, but we'll see what Darnold brings to the table this week. I'm also eager to see what you think of some other potential teaser options on this week's board. I've got a few. I'll lay out a brief case on my end and then pause for each one to see what you think. Feel free to weigh in with any quick thoughts, or if you don't have any thoughts, nothing forced is needed. So wherever you want to take this. But I'll start working down the board in rotation order here. Some 6-point teaser candidates. Again, we want minus 120 or better. If we're looking at 2-team teasers in this range, Miami, minus 1.5, hosting Las Vegas. This fits that classic Wong model, crossing through 3 and 7. A bit of hesitation I have here came from listening to Steve Fezzik on the Even Money podcast this morning, mentioning that Miami has a short week traveling cross country against a Raiders team off its bye. So usually I try not to make too much of these spots or any narratives like that, but this does seem like a rare case where the road team may be much better rested than the home team. Any thoughts on your end, Rich, when it comes to a potential teaser look involving the Dolphins?
I didn't like what I saw for them last night. Tyreek Hill doesn't seem involved. He seems banged up. Waddle had a great first drive and then just seemed to disappear. They have Achane, but they seem to have this crowded backfield where they're not that dynamic Miami offense that they were last year, and they still seem to be trying to find an identity. This feels kind of like a trap game to me. I'm not saying that I like the side of the Raiders. I certainly don't. It might just be more of a stay away for me. But once again, they won last night, so their playoff hopes are not completely dashed. And the Raiders, they're the type of team, but I think that they still want to try to win, even though they should be trying to get a high draft pick. So it feels kind of like a little bit of a trap game sort of scenario. It wouldn't be a leg that I would want to pair, but if it ends up being a 31-6 game, I wouldn't be surprised either.
Sure. And when there's that much variance involved, sometimes the prudent move with teasers is to pass because teasers are inherently bets against variance. So I appreciate that perspective because there are a lot of potential teaser options this week if somebody just wants to look at numbers that can cross 3 and 7 in either direction. But giving it that more qualitative inspection, I think can really help to hopefully nudge bettors in the right direction here. And the next option we can talk through, Atlanta can be taken up to +8 at Denver. A parallel to Miami, this fits that model, crossing through some key numbers. Hesitation I have here, you touched on it earlier. Bo Nix does seem to be improving with more experience over the course of his rookie season, and Atlanta's defensive front is unable to get pressure, so this could be a rare chance for Denver to lean on Nix to build a margin. That said, I know this is a toss-up if you look at the point spread, generally speaking. Any thoughts on possibly teasing Atlanta at Denver?
Well, the first thing I think of is a Bo Nix rushing line. I think that he's going to have so much time in the pocket, and if you get like a low line, you might have an opportunity for an over there, or an under if Vegas, or not Vegas, if the books price it in and they put it too high. But yeah, I would be worried about like that team is on the rise and it's Broncos, and they're well coached, and they are very possibly going to be a playoff team, and the Falcons. They've been wavering a little bit, and they've had some injuries, and they haven't looked crisp. And I think that that division is not incredibly strong. So I think we might be overvaluing the Falcons as a division winner, compared to actually playing some legitimate teams. But yeah, I think that this might actually be a big Bo Nix game, just based on not being able to get any pressure and being able to run the ball effectively. They probably control the clock. So the +8, it's not a bad leg, but I would be a little tenacious taking it in that spot.
You said two things that intrigued me there. One, correcting yourself when referring to how Vegas prices something. It's not necessarily Vegas knows anymore. It's the books. It's the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I heard you there. And number two, a more serious follow-up. I often hear people talking about quarterback rushing yards when they expect a quarterback to be pressured, and maybe he'll need to escape the pocket and rack up some yardage on the ground.
Right.
In this case, it sounded like you thought that Atlanta's inability to get pressure might open up some running possibility for Bo Nix. Am I understanding that correctly?
You could have more designed runs, I think, and just his. I think that if there's no pressure, then he has time to roll out, and or you have RPOs, and you have more options for rushing yards, and he starts to have that in his arsenal, as opposed to just running to escape and getting his rushing yards over based on pressure. So I haven't heard reports. I'm speculating, like I haven't heard official reports on as a game plan, but I do think there might be an opportunity for him to get a decent amount of rushing yards.
All right, I like it. I tried to steer us into the teaser segment, and you've got the focus right back to props in a sense. I can always appreciate that on this show, and we'll be eager to see what books hang for Bo Nix, whether those books happen to be located in Las Vegas or just about anywhere in the world for that matter. Sure. And Rich, sticking in the AFC West when it comes to potential teaser legs, one that I really do like, I'll be up front here, Kansas City +8.5 at Buffalo. There's the narrative Patrick Mahomes is an underdog. I'm not one for narratives for the most part. This one, however, is getting increasingly tough to dismiss every time we see him take the field as an underdog. To me, it's a case of asking the best team in the league with the best quarterback and quite possibly the best coach to keep this a one-score game, if not win outright, when all they seem to do is win outright, however ugly it may look at times. Now, this spot may be time for an overdue first loss for the Chiefs this season, but I'm not going to be surprised if they pull out a win yet again, especially with Buffalo's offensive weapons compromised at the skill positions. Keon Coleman already ruled out. Amari Cooper and Dalton Kincaid likely to be limited if they're in this one. Add it all up. Very enticing to me to take Kansas City up to +8.5. What do you think about this one?
I mean, I do agree that Kansas City is due for a loss, and they're not going undefeated. They have the lowest collective point differential of an undefeated team, in I think the last 15 years. They remind me sort of, although completely different playing style, uh, uh, you know, up to the 2022 Minnesota Vikings that I think what started like 10-2, and they were winning like every close game, and they very well could have been, 7-5, and I think the Chiefs very well could be 6-4, but they have the pedigree of being the two-time defending champions with the best quarterback and the best coach, and all of that aura surrounding it. If there is a spot for a narrative of loss, Josh Allen getting the monkey off the back in the regular season, at least, this is definitely a candidate for that. But I think this game stays under a touchdown. So I do like that leg. I don't think this game is a blowout. I don't think this game is a shootout either. I think this is more of a slugfest, rock fight type of game. And those typically stay with, in the meets and bounds of a touchdown. So I actually do like that as a leg.
As you speak to the Chiefs' point differential this season relative to their record, I think that makes all the sense in the world from a more quantitative standpoint and trying to think of where there could be predictive value moving forward. And at the same time, this year, perhaps more than any other, not only as a lifelong Chargers fan, but as a USC grad, I just feel so scarred from seeing some of my favorite teams over the years seemingly inventing new ways to lose in heartbreaking fashion week after week. So I've really come to believe that as much as I like to get on board with so much of the analytics movement, and again, seeing where that can provide a lot more predictive value than just going off of gut instinct, I have come around to believe that winning is a skill. And I can't put my finger on it, but I don't dispute any of the numbers you shared on the Chiefs. At the same time, I look at Mahomes, I look at Andy Reid, and I just think, is there something to it that enables the Chiefs of all teams to defy some of the conventional norms we've come to expect with things like Pythagorean record and point differential?
Yeah, I mean, if you take last week, they're supposed to lose that game. That's a 95 out of 100. That field goal is in the air. I don't know if like the kicker makes it, but that kick is in the air. That was pretty anomalous that they blocked that kick. So yeah, I mean, it is hard to measure in an analytics fashion like the ability to close games and win. And I think a lot of handicappers and sharps like dismiss it. But our naked eye approach, people can see it, and we know that there is a difference when just if you watch hundreds or thousands of games, that some teams and some guys are different, and you expect them to make the shot or to throw the touchdown. Or just guys that are in that position. Is there a metric for Tom Brady? On those 2-minute drills? Yeah, there is. Like, you expect him to get that ball downfield and either score a touchdown or win or tie the game with a field goal when he's been in those positions. And yeah, this Chiefs team, like these wins, if you go over them, they're walking on water, man. Like I don't know that this is the Patrick Mahomes, against Buffalo with 13 seconds, throwing the ball downfield. Like they are just catching some very, I mean, like, look, I am not someone who criticizes the refereeing or puts the magnifying glass on that, but a lot of people have, like they just have been in, positive variance spots, where things are going their way. But like you and I, when we bet, we know when things are going good, and it seems like everything's going good. It can go the other way as well. Everything can go bad. So for an extended period of time. So I think they're just on a little bit more of a fairy tale run right now. I don't think that they are dominant in anything except for the pedigree of Mahomes and Reid. And I think some of these things are going to come to be, exposed a little bit over the next few weeks and maybe into the playoffs. So I am definitely sell high on this undefeated team. But that being said, I do like them +8 or +8.5, depending on, what number on a teaser.
Right. The beauty of the teaser, you can think that they might not be as good or bulletproof as that unblemished record would indicate, but here they could lose this game by a touchdown and the teaser leg still covers. And of course, it wouldn't be a surprise if they were to win it outright. So glad to see we've got some alignment on the Chiefs on this week's teaser slate. And I guess we can keep the AFC West train rolling and this time look to fade an AFC West team in the teaser market. Cincinnati plus 7.5 at the Chargers on Sunday night. I won't belabor the point here after my lengthy Cincinnati team total over
Have the Chargers beat anybody by 8? That's been
exactly.
decent. I don't think so.
It has been refreshing with Jim Harbaugh to see some games this year that should be blowouts that have been. You get the Chiefs, the Panthers in week 2 with Bryce Young being a disaster. The Jameis Winston experience after the Browns beat Baltimore. Winston throws 3 picks against the Chargers. The offense doesn't even have to do anything in the second half. They win comfortably. Last week against Tennessee, the prior week against New Orleans, before that Cleveland trip. A lot of these wins have been refreshingly comfortable, and I've kind of been able to check out in the second half. So I do want to give the Chargers credit for amassing margin where they've been in a spot where that should be the case. But I feel like in this matchup, we're looking at roughly even teams. No surprise to me if the Bengals win the game. And again, it's the biggest test to date for that new and improved Chargers defense. So at the very least, I do expect the Bengals to keep it close. Any thoughts at a possible look on teasing the Bengals up through 3 and 7 to plus 7.5?
I think this is a close game. Either way, I think the spread is right. I mean, if you've been to SoFi, which I'm sure you have, to see a game, we also have no. I say we, like I'm part of the Chargers. The Chargers have don't really have a home field advantage. You have opposing fans, and that gets factored into the spread a lot. So you might have a lot of Cincinnati Bengal fans at this game as well, and that is a factor. But the Chargers have not blown out any good team. I don't see, especially if Khalil Mack is inactive or limited, like this game is it's going to stay in the margins of a touchdown, I believe. So I like that as a leg, possibly with the Chiefs. Like I like that as a second option or mixing and matching. But yeah, the Bengals have been rolling, man, and I don't think their record reflects what this team is. They, blew up everyone's survivor pool in week 1, and they kind of been struggling to come out of that since then. But the last few weeks, they kind of and they had these coin flippy games against Baltimore where they just seem to, be on the wrong side of. So their record doesn't reflect the quality of the team that they are. And on the Chargers side, if you are not just a good story this year, and Harbaugh is creating a great program and good infrastructure, if you are an actual team that is going to not just make the playoffs, but actually, give Chargers fans and the narrative that, hey, maybe they could win a playoff game, get to the AFC Championship game. This is the type of game you have to see them be dominant in, and I just see this being a close game, man. Like I don't see this being a blowout one. It would be more likely that the Bengals blow out the Chargers, to be honest, just because of that offensive firepower. But I'm looking forward to it. So I would favor the tease on the Bengals side.
Yeah, I hear you. If it's a low-scoring slugfest, then I will gladly lose my team total bet for Cincinnati because I think that kind of game script could favor the Chargers. And if it's a runaway, then the Bengals do have the firepower to probably more easily build the margin at this point. Either way, we're looking at maybe a close Chargers win or a runaway Bengals win that would benefit this teaser. And I'll also say I'm part of the problem with the Chargers' lack of home field advantage. Born and raised in San Diego, now living in LA. They've been my team my entire life. I have not yet been to SoFi Stadium. So maybe the lack of a home field advantage, guilty as charged when it comes to being a fan that hasn't really shown up there is maybe I should have up to this point. But I want to take you, Rich, to one more game where there might not be a lot of home field advantage involved. And that will keep us with primetime on the Week 11 slate. Monday Night Football, the beleaguered Dallas Cowboys hosting Houston. Yes. You can take the Texans down to -1.5, as you touched on earlier in the show. And
I think it's going to be a very popular leg, yeah.
Yeah, it is so easy to want to fade Dallas right now. And again, you've touched on this. I think the one thing that gives me some hesitation here is that just purely from a quantitative aspect, road favorites, tend to be suboptimal for teasers. There can just be a bit more variance when it comes to road favorites not being able to seal the deal and do little more than win outright at times. And the Houston offense just hasn't been clicking this season. Of course, if they get Nico Collins back and he's close to full strength, that could make a major difference. So anything else to add when it comes to a possible look at teasing the Texans this week as well?
Yeah, I mean, once again, like I see it as a buy low spot. The way they blew the game to Goff's 5 interceptions, I think this line should be 9.5. Like this is Dallas is. I don't know if they'd be favored against anybody. Frankly, if they were playing anybody in Dallas, I don't think they'd be favored. Maybe the Panthers. Aside from that, like this team is a dumpster fire. Their quarterback situation, which is how a lot of people gauge this sort of thing. Like they can't run the ball, like they can't defend. So I would not be scared in the spot at all. I like the points. I like the tease aspect of it. I am not concerned about the offensive struggles for the Texans that happened last week. And if Nico Collins comes back, they should be even more effective. But even without him, I don't see this game being close. I mean, I'd be looking at alt spreads as well, for anywhere from 13.5 up to 21.
All right, so call it the Texans any which way as far as Rich's Week 11 portfolio is concerned. And in addition to a nice list of 6-point teaser candidates this week, got a couple of 6.5-point candidates I'll run by you as well. And we'll note from a pricing standpoint, if we're jumping up to 6.5-point teasers, we want -130 or better for 2-teamers. And the first team that really grabs my attention in this category would be Cleveland, taking them up to +7.5 at New Orleans. I think there are a couple of narratives in play here. Again, tough to quantify. I try not to give narratives too much weight, but they can matter. The Browns perhaps being rejuvenated now with Jameis Winston at quarterback. New Orleans, on the other hand, in a classic letdown spot after getting that dead cat bounce last week and an extremely fortunate win against a division rival in Atlanta. The Saints, +1 in turnovers, made both of their field goals. Atlanta missed 3 field goals if we include one of them being blocked. Saints still win the game, but only by 3 points. Now we look at this matchup this week. Cleveland, Nick Chubb probably closer to full strength off the Browns' bye. The Saints still haven't had their bye week. The fly in the ointment for me here is Jameis Winston and the inherent variance that comes with that whole equation.
Yep.
That said, I'm not going to be surprised if the Browns win this one outright. That 7.5-point cushion does have some appeal. What are your thoughts, Rich?
I looked at this game. First of all, I don't want to watch this game. This looks like a terrible game. But yeah, my first thought was what you talked about with Jameis. He is the ultimate feast or famine quarterback. As you saw the last couple of weeks, where Sean Watson goes down and he comes in, and you're like, wow, this is a guy who can finally throw downfield. Like maybe he deserves a starting job. And then you see him against the Chargers, and you go, oh, wait a minute, I remember. I know who this guy is, and I don't have a very strong take on this game. For me, it probably would be a stay away. I don't. Yeah, I don't have a lean or even like a narrative, sort of thought, except for, But I will say that Derek Carr definitely is less accurate when he's being pressured, and you have that Myles Garrett aspect. So if you can get pressure on the quarterback, but the Jameis aspect, Jameis Winston interception turnover, machine aspect, I don't know which Jameis you're gonna get, so it's hard for me to handicap that.
That's all I need to hear, because I was already a bit hesitant, and I'm even more hesitant for the only other team that I would consider in a 6.5-point teaser this week. I'll bring it up now anyway for the sake of the thought exercise, and maybe this will still spark some value to the audience. I was considering Baltimore +3.5 at the Steelers to pair with the Browns in a teaser. Now, the Ravens here would break that golden rule many adhere to against teasing through 0. But it's almost like getting 7 points for the price of 6.5, including crossing through 3 twice If we consider market makers lines of Baltimore -3, shaded heavily towards 3.5, I think right now, actually not as heavily as before. I'm seeing Baltimore -3, -115 at both Circa and Bookmaker. And to play this, I would need to start at that juice 3, not a soft -3.5 if we see that number again, because we
Yeah.
want to make sure those 6.5 points with Baltimore would get you up through the 3 and up to +3.5. A bit more hesitation here. One, Kyle Hamilton, uncertain status. That could loom large for a Baltimore secondary, especially with Russell Wilson's penchant for the deep ball. And now with 2 contested catch specialists in George Pickens and Mike Williams. And one more thing here, road favorites, again, suboptimal for teasers. That's almost always going to give me at least some pause, as does betting against Mike Tomlin and Pittsburgh as an underdog. Although in this case, the slightly outside the box approach with a teaser on Baltimore would make the Ravens the underdog. Anything to add on your end, Rich, for anybody considering taking the Ravens up to +3.5 in a 6.5 point teaser?
You know, having watched and bet on these things for a long time, I'm always very cautious in these sort of division games between 2 playoff contenders, with 2 teams in the division. I have Baltimore as my Super Bowl pick, but their secondary is concerning. And what is Russell Wilson surprisingly brought the last of 3 games is a downfield threat, and they brought in Mike Williams. And so these kind of things, I really haven't seen manifest yet as far as being value one way or the other. But I would be careful with Baltimore, who looks awesome week to week, but is not dominating certain teams the way that they should, because they still have some holes that they need to patch up, especially in their defense. That would be a stay away for me personally, but yeah, these division games, I'm very cautious of.
Makes all the sense in the world to me. So I will chalk it up as one play for now for show purposes. I might add some more as the week goes on, but there is a pick that you kind of identified earlier, and I tried to bite my tongue until this moment. I do like a 2-team 6-point teaser at -120 or better, pairing at Kansas City +8.5 at Buffalo with Cincinnati +7.5 at the Chargers. Hopefully we can just see the Chargers win this game by a field goal and everybody goes home happy.
Yeah, no, that'd be the dream scenario. Make some money and watch our favorite team win.
Indeed. And Rich, speaking of making money, if we want to move on from the NFL Week 11 betting board specifically, this is a busy but opportunistic time of year for you, I'd imagine, when it comes to both the NFL and the NBA. I'd love it if you could tell us a bit about what your day-to-day looks like with both sports now in full swing.
Well, it really starts the night. I mean, NBA is an everyday thing. NFL, like I said, it's Tuesday. The lines don't start to come out till Wednesday for the Sunday games, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, different sites, and then Saturday Saturday and Sunday morning there's still lines coming out for certain players, specifically for player props. So NFL is kind of a daily thing, but like the days where we're actually looking to evaluate and get down to the lines is later in the week typically. But we're kind of doing our prep on the matchups and kind of spots that we believe there might be something opening up that might be a value. NBA is a daily grind. That starts the night before. We're looking at the results from the day. The production of the players. What reads we made correctly, what reads we made incorrectly, and looking at the schedule and the matchups for the next day. The next day, lines are opening up all through the night, sometimes very early in the morning. And, we're evaluating our data and our modeling and looking for spots that, have value or could have value later in the day. NBA is like NFL in their own different ways. There is a lot of news and injury data that you have to consider. So it's kind of an all-day thing where you have certain games where it's a pretty clean matchup. And then there's other games where half the team is questionable, and you kind of have to wait on that for the later in the day. And then it's just the execution of getting down, and then that goes until last tip, which is like 7 p.m. So and then after that, like I actually need to go back and study the games, because I'm not watching them live, like the 4 p.m. games live. I'm still working. So it is very much a all-encompassing handicapping, truly. And in NFL, we have the slate the whole week ahead of time, so it's a little bit of a slower process. We can take our time with it, and then once the lines start to drop is when we start to just be as prepared as we can with our modeling and what we want to do, or what we're looking for as far as edge.
I appreciate that very thorough breakdown when it comes to comparing and contrasting the NFL and NBA markets. And Rich, your Twitter profile specifically mentions player prop betting. How did you come to specialize in player props?
Well, it was through my relationship with Porter. He introduced me, like I said, in 2015, and this is back when I was doing $25 bets on Bovada, and I mean at that point the entire market favored unders. Like it was so easy. Like you actually could just bet an under on every line on Bovada and be profitable. And I was doing this sort of part time as a side hustle. This was not like my profession or on a professional level. I did this for a couple of years, and probably made, oh god, like 500 600 units, just not knowing even close to what I know now. But I like specifically, the majority of our volume, in my volume, it comes from NBA, and I love that sport for 20 years. I've followed the players as a fan, and now I follow it as a profession, as an income. And player props, it is probably higher ROI than a lot of what people do on straights, and like a lot of professionals in this industry. It's point of contention sometimes. Player props obviously harder to get more volume. But if you are, and you have some of like the inside baseball on how to execute, it's a great job, and it's a great nuanced profession. I tried to explain it to friends and family, and no one gets it. So I would just always end up talking to guys like you and chopping it up. But yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky, and just happen to have the right set of of skills as far as understanding the mathematical aspect, and then understanding the players, understanding the weight of data, narratives, coach speak, and then not having too much weight to bias. Giannis is really going to try tonight. So what? That's not like how handicapping goes. But sometimes if it's a rival player, you do factor that in. But it's not like it's like the sixth most important thing, right? So like anything, it's a lot of complexity that you break down to simplicities, and you try to find the value, and you trust the math. And if you put enough volume together, you end up being able to make a living even. So it's pretty crazy that I even fell into this, and that I do this as my job now. I never would have thought I'd be doing this 15 years ago or 10 years ago. It just was unimaginable. So it's pretty wild.
You touched a couple times on the aspect of volume, and getting down can be tougher, of course, in markets like player props as opposed to full game sides and totals in some of the major sports. I'm wondering if this next question is partially related to the ability to get down or just purely related to an ROI that you can't ignore, maybe somewhere in between. But Rich, how would you describe the markets within player props in which you focus the most?
Um, I mean, there is probably higher ROI in more exotic markets, but if we're talking about, eh, I mean, we cover it all, but we're talking about NBA specifically, or
It can
NFL.
be either or. Yeah, just if there are any markets that you tend to gravitate toward.
I mean, it's all offensive markets. Let's start with that. But yeah, NBA, just starts with points, assists, rebounds, combos, points and rebounds, points and assists, rebounds, 3-pointers, and I mean there are exotics when you get into blocks, steals, or stocks, but no one's able to really get much volume on that sort of thing. Um, and then yeah, NFL. I mean, I should mention that there is the correlated parlay aspect of it as well. Like if you
Sure.
have a team where they're missing a center, the rebounds and the assists got to go, or sorry, the rebounds got to go somewhere. And so you can kind of have under rebounds on one side and over rebounds on another. I'm just not giving a specific example, but there is value to correlated parlays as well in doing SGPs. Um, when it comes to football, yeah, it's all the majors. That's where that's the volume is. So even though these might not be the highest ROI categories, it is the highest volume categories. So if you're talking about passing props, receiving, rushing attempts, receptions, rushing plus receiving, and then I'm always kind of trying to find new markets, because new markets typically are the ones that have massive edge that people haven't discovered. A lot of the bread and butter of what I do is the major markets, but other people are doing it as well. Which means that if a lot of people are doing it, stands to reason that the market's going to get sharper. And so, at the beginning especially at the beginning of every season, like I am fishing around for anything new that these books are giving out that other people may have not discovered, that might be mispriced, that the market isn't being factored in correctly. And and then there's ARBs, and there's just plain market shopping, shopping the market, like finding the best line. Like these things sound basic, but like it's all encompassing to do every aspect of that. If you want to be profitable, you can't just do, like there's plenty. I'm not going to go a little rant here. There's plenty of touts on Twitter or X, whatever it is, that they have these amazing records, and they post these MGM lines, and they post ESPN. Anybody that's been doing this for any amount of time knows that if you just bet only player props, you will be capped to nothing very, very quickly. And these touts will have this amazing record, but it's not real. That isn't real. It's not how like people who actually make money in this really do it. What I'm trying to say is that a lot of people can just pick winners. Being able to find the winners and get volume, that's that's where the expertise really come in.
Yeah, to quote Spanky, winning is just the beginning. And I don't mean to trivialize the skill required to win at this. Most people never get there, and that's okay if they're doing this for fun and only risking what they can easily afford to lose. No harm done. But for those that really want to scale up at a very successful clip, that's where things get taken to a whole other level. And that's where I think it also opens the door to the broader betting ecosystem. So, Rich, I'd also like to ask you, I guess, building on some recent episodes where I featured an originator in Billy and a mover in Riley. I was fascinated by the insights they both shared on this show. I guess if we imagine a Venn diagram of originating and moving, where would you put yourself within that dynamic of the sports betting ecosystem?
I would say probably like 75-25 originator to moving. Maybe even a little bit higher, frankly. Maybe 80-20. Yeah, 80-20 is probably more accurate. What's the difference between 75-25 and 80-20 in this scenario? Not really that much, but we'll call it 80-20 as far as actually originating and compared to moving.
And if we're price sensitive, those differences can absolutely matter when you're talking
Very, you're
75-25
fair,
versus
touche,
80-20.
yeah.
So
In
I guess
hypotheticals.
what does it look like for you to dip in and out of those different lanes? I'd imagine at this point it's probably second nature for you, but that can seem like operating in two different worlds to a lot of people with a bit of an outside perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's two different parts of the brain, two parts of the business, and you just it's like anything when you organize your day, you focus all in on one, and then you shift gears and you focus on the other. It's it's interesting that in sports betting, as a profession, that you do actually have to have so many different skill sets. Networking is a big part of this game now too.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to be a social creature and be able to deal with people and manage people. This is this is a lot of, for most professionals, this is a team game. People aren't working by themselves, and if they are, they're probably like the $50-$100 bettor, and they can work by themselves. But if you're trying to do this as any sort of legitimate profession, people work in teams, and so there's not all sports bettors have the best social skills, we'll call it.
Bedside manner.
Bedside manner, yeah. It's some unique characters in this business. So yeah, I mean, the grind is the grind when it comes to like originating and modeling and doing all of that process. And then moving is a completely different method, pretty much.
As you speak to the grind, I'm reminded of a podcast I listened to just this morning. It, I think, was Against the Rules by Michael Lewis. He's doing a series on betting right now. And his latest episode was great. It features Roxy Roxborough and Rufus Peabody quite prominently. And there was a line from Roxy talking about betting as a hard way to make an easy living. That kind of adage. I know it can be a grind. And when the grind really stacks up, that takes me to a place of maybe wanting to introduce the hops as a way to take off the edge a little bit. So, Rich, if you'll humor me with that attempt at a transition here. Last week on this show, I featured Celebration Ale IPA by Sierra Nevada as a holiday seasonal favorite of mine. And I'm curious from your perspective, if there's anything when you can step away from the grind that you find comforting and or prefer to turn to at this time of the year.
Yeah, I know this might be sacrilegious. I'm not a massive IPA guy, but I am a drinker.
Completely fine. Yeah.
I am a drinker. So I did work in hospitality, and I bartended for many years. So I love cocktails, and I've been getting much more into wine recently. Getting a little bit older, a little bit more sophisticated. And but I mean, I like it when I like the balance. The balance I need is contrasted to being in front of a screen. Most of my day is screen. And so I want to be outside. I want to see trees. I want to see moving water. I want to be in the sun. That is what I need to recharge, to, sit in a room for 10 hours, typing and looking at screens and hustling, so, and traveling. But even when I travel, I want to be outside, so, and then, the basics, spending time with friends and family and, laughing and sharing joy. You need that to justify the grind. It can be, especially in like with NBA season. NBA it's every day. Occasionally you'll have like a day off, like election day. There was no games, but guess what the day before was? 15 games. They're trying to kill me. 15 games the day before election day. So, you have to, take a step back and enjoy the fruits of your labor, be a foodie, go to a bar, get drunk, hang out with your friends, be outside. And, I'm not that complicated. Those things make me happy. And, yeah, it keeps the balance and makes both things worth it.
That perspective you just shared, I find to be a masterful way of blending the hops with the Malinsky Minute. And I have a couple more quick questions for you to wrap things up in regard to the Malinsky Minute. But first, I've got to follow up from your days bartending to what you prefer to drink on your own time these days. If there's
Yeah.
a difference between these two questions, favorite cocktail to make and favorite cocktail to drink.
As a bartender, I used to say, I don't care what I make. And it was true. And I'm giving you the honest answer. Like I was very well versed in mixology. I was very, very good at my job. And people were like, what's your thing? My honest answer to someone at the bar ask me, what's your favorite thing to make? I go, vodka soda. And the reason why is I'm like, because I'm trying to make your drink and move on to the next person. Like, I enjoyed making cocktails for myself, but as far as when I was working, I, preferred to just get on with it and move. I would much rather talk about what I like to drink. And the way I've always stated this to people is that I like to drink everything, but it's based on the environment, the mood, what you're doing. Like if I'm going out to dinner, I'm at a steakhouse, I want to start with a dirty gin martini, and then I want to have a glass of Cabernet with the steak. If I'm on vacation, I want margaritas. If I'm at a pool party, I want to drink beers and shots. That sort of dynamic as far as what I'm doing, the cocktails matching up with the vibes. So I'm pretty open. If I'm going out with the boys having cigars, I want to drink old fashions or Manhattan. So I am not married to any sort of single drink. I'm like, that's the only thing I drink. I love spirits, and I love the cocktail culture, and I like to match it up with what my activities are.
I love it. I think of the notion time and place. Dave Malinsky was so well versed in that when it came to sports, music, drinking, food. So I think we're thinking along the same lines here. And I guess staying in that same vein of time and space for a moment, I think there have been some good times and plenty of bad times when it comes to a shared space we have as fans of both the Chargers and the Lakers. What's it like for you, the more you get into betting, to try to stay in touch with the human element and still not stray too far from that inner fandom?
Yeah, I have always tried to stay connected to my fandom because it's what ultimately led me to this profession at the same time, and I still try to retain the joy of being a teenager and living or dying, whether, the Lakers won or lost every night. I don't have that as much anymore because, sometimes I have unders on Anthony Davis, I'll be honest. And I try to keep them mutually exclusive where I go, I'm like, I want to win the bet and I want the Lakers to win. And I just try to root for both, and it's out of my control. So I just kind of root for both. And, I know I'm supposed to prefer to win the money, but I just sort of let be, what will be. But yeah, I think it's important truly as in this profession to still be connected to why you love sports and why you love your teams, and, why, and loving the teams from where you're from. And, I don't think the Lakers had a interesting bubble championship, and I don't think they're going to make any sort of real deep run with this roster currently constructed. But the Chargers are up and coming. Nothing but good things ahead. Hope. Yeah, there's hope. It's after watching football for most of my adult life, I learned so much that it is about the infrastructure and the culture and team building in the most boring way. Chargers drafted Joe Alt when Malik Neighbors was on the board. You ever hear of a offensive lineman demanding a trade or a top offensive lineman claiming the free agency? It never happens. Those guys, they get drafted, they're locked up with that team for their career. Receivers, come and go. Some of them are bust, but these, so the Chargers, I think, are just doing it correctly. They're just building on the lines. Great quarterback, great coach, and they'll cheap out on the skill position players, and hopefully the team gets some bargains and has a chance to be in the company of the real elite teams. Either we'll see what happens the rest of this year, but going to the next call it 5-year run of this Herbert Harbaugh marriage.
All right. Well, Rich, just one final question for you here to round out the Malinsky Minute and the show as a whole. I was blessed to get to know Dave as a mentor. So putting you in the role of potential mentor to the audience, catching this conversation, what advice do you have for someone who's new in this industry?
I mean, that's really easy to answer. Just send me a DM and send me some accounts. No. I think just getting educated correctly with the math and the mindset and understanding value, and honing the skill of being able to identify and see value with whatever model you're doing, and managing your emotions and your expectations, and understand that, people can give advice on variance. You don't, the good variance will never be as great as bad variance is terrible. So the extended losing periods are going to affect you more significantly than the extended winning periods. And if anybody who seriously wants to do this long term, you're going to have extended variance both directions, and the losing side is a lot more mentally draining than the winning is, elating. For not trying to rhyme, but you get my drift on that. That you have to have the right mindset going into this.
Yeah, very sound perspective. I think that's an appropriate note to put a pin in this conversation. But as we wrap up, to the audience, want to thank you for tuning in. And Rich, I appreciate the earnest answer there, but I will still encourage the audience to go ahead and follow you on Twitter at @prop_Rich, and remind everybody those DMs are open if anybody's interested in possibly partnering in some capacity. Rich, thank you so much for the time and insight you brought to this conversation, and best of luck with your betting moving forward from the hardwood to the gridiron.
Matt, it was great talking to you. I really appreciate you having me on today.